Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. retains his lead over his rivals for the presidency in another pre-election survey. A new SWS poll commissioned by Strat-based ADR Institute showed the son of the late Philippine dictator getting 50% of the support of respondents. In a distant second place was Vice President Leni Robredo with 19%. As for the vice presidential post, Marcos's running mate, Davao Mayor Sara Duterte Carpio, was the top choice with 44%. She's followed by Senate President Tito Soto with 33%. What's working for the Marcos camp as shown in recent surveys? Let's talk to veteran campaign strategist Alan Herman. Alan, good morning to you.
Good morning, Karen, and good morning to everyone getting a head start. How are you today?
All right, and the one person who has a head start is definitely Bongbong Marcos. Can you explain that?
Absolutely. The surveys are showing him leading, regardless of which which reputable survey firm you're talking about. He's always ahead. So, campaigns are always just a mixture of 4 M's. It's man, message, machinery, and money. And having said that, it seems that Marcos Jr. Seems to have the advantage in perhaps every M. So that could explain his lead in all of the survey firms' pre-election ratings.
Okay, let's talk about the 4 M's, and can you relate it to BBM?
Well, when you talk about the man, he is right now. I don't know if you've noticed, he's evoking his father very much. So it really ties into the Babangon Muli catchphrase that he's using. So if you look at him now, I'm not sure if his handlers are necessarily doing this very consciously, but his manner of speaking, even the way they comb his hair, the inflections, they're all very evocative of his father, Marcos Sr. And this really instills nostalgia in people, what they call the new nostalgia, even among the young voters whose parents tell them about the golden era, etc., etc. In terms of messaging, there's really only 3 ways to, and I'm going to a subcategory here. There's really only 3 ways to do election campaign messaging. There's just AIM: alert, inspire, or motivate. You either scare a voter to vote for you. If you don't vote for me, the Philippines will be a narco state. Drugs will run rampant. So you're scaring people into doing that. Or conversely, you can also say, if you don't vote for me, the other candidates will steal from you. So that's an alert play. The more powerful one, though, is the I, the inspire, wherein you're linking your candidacy to an abstract ideal, something to aspire for, something great. Babangon tayo muli. We will rise. We will restore the golden era when infrastructure was golden, when economy was booming, when discipline and order was the habit of the day. Yeah. So the Marcos camp is really using that tact, I feel, using the inspire angle. And then there's M, motivate, which is a short-term reward for a vote. So in this case, since 2016, I think most of our viewers would know that, and listeners would know, that there has been this pervasive myth of the Taliano gold, wherein a lot of people are buying into that M, or are motivated by the fact that if Marcos Jr. wins, they will either be the recipient of a gold bar. Yes, I know. I actually said that on live TV, or a specific amount of cash, a rather huge amount of cash every month. So it's a great mixture of AIM messaging. In terms of machinery, going back to the M's, I think the Marcos camp has, apart from his own inbuilt machinery, has leveraged greatly on his running mate, Mayor Inday Sara's machinery, which is formidable considering she's the closest to what we would consider an incumbent. And then in terms of financial resources, the last M, the money, I will not make any lengthy commentary on the money aspect of the Marcos Jr. campaign, but I think it is well established that their resources are quite formidable. So that is, looking at it from the lens of pure analytics and why he's ahead, I would say that that's where the answer lies.
Okay. Well, I find that quite interesting. And actually, your methodology is very systematic. In terms of the motivation, it's Mr. Marcos himself who said he's never seen that gold. And in effect, he's saying it's not true. So why do you believe that people still believe it, considering no less than Bongbong Marcos himself has said he's never seen it?
Well, I'm happy you used the very nuanced term "in effect," Karen.
Yeah.
In effect, perhaps to us or to a certain voter base would be very obvious.
Mhm.
But unfortunately, unless perhaps he outright says that this is not true, or more specifically, he denounces the recruitment tool, because the recruitment tool is happening. I mean, he can say there's no gold, but the fact is, it's going on right now. I think it's quite well documented. His supporters are still using this myth as a very, very strong motivator for volunteers to join in on the campaign. There are certificates, there are pictures, and let's not even get started on what's out there in the internet.
Yeah.
Give you a toothache. But I suppose you can deny the gold, the existence of the gold, but I think there should be a condemnation of the actual recruitment method.
Okay, very good point. But the one thing that's going for Mr. Marcos, and I wanted to just to discuss this further, is you talk about the money, but money won't be the reason he's high in the surveys, only because we've seen candidates in the past who have, let's face it, who've also had a huge war chest and frankly have lost, right? We've seen that.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So money isn't the main barometer for a candidate to win. Duterte being the perfect example of that. He had no donors. He couldn't fundraise. He was so scared. And eventually, suddenly, right, he used the alert and inspire both at the same time.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
if you are leading in the surveys, the businessmen will come to you. They will fund you. I think that's a fact. Right?
Absolutely a fact. Well said, Karen. And the table really stands on four legs. So again, it's man, message,
Alan,
machinery, and money.
my question is, since you've been doing this for a long time, we are talking about a personality whose family was literally kicked out of the country, was globally shamed. In other words, this is the one time that the world has celebrated the Philippines for what it's called the peaceful revolution, right? So for something as historically dramatic as that, why would the son, no less than the namesake, have these kinds of numbers? You know, there is something there in that 30 plus year gap. Other late dictators, their sons or daughters would not be this popular in their own country. So what is it, Alan?
Well, the analogy is, and I don't mean to offend sensibilities of the listeners and viewers, but it's been bandied about that the analogy is that a Hitler Jr. will win in Germany. I mean, it's that would be a close analogy according to many people, right? But the experience of the insight needs to be tied into an experience, and sadly, as you mentioned, EDSA was a long time ago. There was no cable TV then. I remember Jane Fonda flashing the L sign after the world was celebrating with us in '86. But '86 was a long time ago, and insight, unfortunately, dilutes when the experience is no longer fresh. So
But
the insights
86
that we gleaned.
But Alan, 86 isn't that long ago. I mean, really, you have generations of voters, Filipinos, who witnessed and actually lived through martial law and actually witnessed 86. And yet you have these numbers. That's, for me, what's been unexplained by analysts.
Well, I suppose the term historical revisionism gets bandied about a lot, wherein exactly that, the reasons behind that EDSA revolution and what caused the uproar during that time from the generation that preceded us has been completely twisted. And sadly, often the loudest voice gets the most attention, and the loudest voice often gets mistaken for the truth. and that's exactly what happened. Their voice is loud, it's pervasive. I'm not necessarily talking about the candidate himself, but certainly his supporters have been at this for quite a while as well. It's been a systematic, very well organized and well oiled effort
Mm.
to
But
explain it
it-
away.
I was thinking, Alan, of course, historical revisionism can get you as far maybe as the Senate, but not these numbers. So that's what I'm getting here, right? When
Right.
Mr. Marcos and even Senator Amy Marcos, the Filipino people have accepted they're sila yung anak. Let them prove themselves. Therefore, in winning a Senate seat, you don't have people really shocked, right?
Mhm.
But it's the numbers of Mr. Marcos that are quite astounding, because the last time these numbers have come out was Erap Estrada. Not even Duterte had these numbers. So is it more that nothing has changed after 86? Is it more that, frankly, if Marcos had his cronies, we built new cronies? I mean, really, structurally, has anything really changed for people to end up saying, yun na lang, wala naman nagbago eh. Get the
In
point?
fact, I absolutely get the point. In fact,
Right?
the
Old
Filipino
cronies, but then there are new cronies.
indeed.
So that's the question.
Well, the Filipino voter is by nature change partial. We want change. So you nailed it on the head when you said, nasubukan na yung mga quote-unquote liberal eh. Nasubukan na yung quote-unquote dilaw. Hence, they use that as almost with a bad taste in their mouth. So they did see that, or the narrative is that nothing changed. In fact, a lot of people say, well, since 86, things have not only stagnated, maybe even gotten worse. So they long for, that's why they become very, very rife and open and susceptible to having revisionist concepts brought into their head. Because again, the insight has to be drawn from the experience. And sadly, the experience of many is, tama ka, Karen, yung lumang crony na palitan ng bagong crony. Hindi naman talaga nagbago. It did not, there were no systemic changes brought about. That is the experience of the many. And I think this should be also a wake-up call for those people. Because, I mean, there are two sides of the coin. There are those people who believe that, the gains of EDSA are ever pure and that it was the Camelot of the Philippines, when in fact, perhaps they should also have their feet on the ground and see that this was not the experience of many. And we're seeing this in the surveys now.
Okay, very interesting what you said, Alan. The humility to accept it wasn't the experience of many, right? Okay, my next question is VP Leni Robredo. Lito Banayo has said she has a cap of 14%. Now, nobody really has a cap as we've known. Duterte started with single digit and suddenly ended with a lead of 11%, above, I think, even Senator Grace Poe. Do you remember?
Yes. And
Right?
March 15, last 2016.
Absolutely. So technically, no candidate has a cap, but considering you have Leni Robredo, who's worked so hard during the pandemic, why can't she eat up into Marcos and Duterte's voter base? What's happening, Alan?
Well, first, with all respect, I mean,
Of
I admire
course.
the man so much. To Lito Banayo, one of my idols. But I think I don't know where he's getting that cap figure, because we have to recall that VP Leni got 14 million votes when she ran as vice president in 2016. So I'm not sure if there are many people out there who were dissatisfied with their vote. I'm not sure if there are many people there. Those 14 million were sad that they voted for VP Leni and would not vote for VP Leni again. Having said that, I think the target here, if I was, I mean, I am a math guy, I suppose. I know the numbers behind the campaign.
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily be targeting the Marcos votes at this point. Just maybe a portion of it because it's necessary to catch up. But it's really hard to convert the Marcos votes to Leni because they're diametric opposites. They truly are. In the same way, a Leni voter will never say, "Ay, kung wala si Leni, I will vote for Marcos Jr." They're diametric opposites politically on the spectrum, maybe ideologically. to dramatize it more. Ideologically, they're on opposite sides of the spectrum. So tough job ahead for the VP Lenny Camp and their handlers.
Alan, is it fair to say that Isko and Lenny technically would have shared the same voters? Because would he have been the alternative to Marcos? And Lenny is perceived by some as the alternative to Marcos too. Would that be fair?
No, in fact, thanks for mentioning that, Karen. I meandered about your last question and didn't actually mention that point. That's a fantastic point. The reason why there's so much difficulty also eating the Marcos Jr. votes is because of cannibalism among the remaining candidates. Yeah. It's true what they say. I mean, you see it a lot on social media. It's almost true what they're saying now. It's Marcos Jr. and everybody else. So there's some cannibalism happening on the I'm not voting for Marcos Jr. Voter.
And Alan, being a political strategist, if you were to, I guess it would be very difficult with these numbers, but how would you improve the campaign of the other candidates? So what's lacking?
Right.
You talked about the strength of campaigns in which you said the Marcos camp has all of it. But let's talk about Lenny's camp and Isko's camp. Isko was the shining star, right?
He sure was.
Okay, so let's talk about that based on your 4 M's. How should each improve?
Well, in terms of the 4 M's, you need to enhance something. You need to equalize your so-called weakness. And you need to be exceptional in one thing. Mayor Isko, if we're talking about Mayor Isko, I think should go out on more public fora. He should go out on debates. He owns the stage. He's natural. That's his training. So I would say that the camera loves him. He should concentrate more on that. I'm wondering why he's not tapping on his former showbiz contacts. That is a powerful influencer at this stage in the campaign, wherein you have celebrity endorsements coming out and throwing their weight behind you. I'm wondering why Mayor Isko is doing that. I believe Vice President Lenny is beginning to go to that strategy. Comms-wise, in the latter part of the campaign, you have your 3 A's. You applaud. So continue applauding the good things you're doing. But yes, the other A sadly also stands for attack. You also begin to attack. So start hitting maybe ever so slightly. Again, that's a very, very tricky discipline.
Yeah.
But,
I wanted to ask you, are attacks always good? Because some have said the reason why Mr. Marcos seems to be above the fray is he refuses to attack.
In fact, it is one of the main reasons why he is leading the surveys, because his messaging is absolutely, very campfire, kumbaya moment. We're all holding hands. It's unity. So if you notice now, what the other candidates are doing is that they're hitting that very message. They're actually attacking that very message and saying, that's your solution. Economic problems, unity, magkaisa. Peace and order, unity ang sagot. Crime and corruption, unity pa rin ang sagot. So they're actually hitting that message. This stage in the campaign, the attack quadrant has to be present already, especially with a lead like that. It's a necessary evil. Kailangan umupa ka rin ng konti.
I see. Okay, interesting the attack method, because I remember the vice presidential debates in 2016 where it was that moment between Robredo and Marcos, and Robredo attacked Marcos and said, apologize first, return the money. And you had other vice presidential candidates in that same debate chiming in. So literally, Mr. Marcos was attacked, which could be one of the reasons why would I go to another debate just for all of you to gang
up on me?
To gang up on me, what for, right? So no, the question now is, will attacking help Robredo at this point?
Well, the conventional wisdom would say that it would actually favor Mayor Moreno more, Isko more.
I see.
Because again, the fallout, the non-tenacious Marcos Jr. voters, if you're talking about the quote-unquote soft voters, the better term is non-tenacious, the less tenacious Marcos voters, again, would never necessarily go to VP Lenny. because that they are anybody but Lenny, the ABL thing, right? So more likely, any cast-off or turned-off voters from attack incidents would favor Mayor Isko.
Okay. And do you believe his attacks, I mean, based on your, at least your analysis now, do you think his attack messaging is clear? Because he does say, nasubukan na natin ang dalawang pamilya. Iba naman. But it's not as clear as choose me. You understand? I mean, I'm not a messaging expert. So I'm curious, is he clear?
First, I would definitely dispute that. I think you are a messaging expert, Karen. I think you're a fine messaging expert. But I could actually use Mayor Isko's attack strategy as a case study, because by saying that, he's actually hitting two birds with one stone. He's actually saying, let these guys fight it out. We've tried them, and again, appealing to that strange partiality of Filipinos. Nasubukan na yan. Bago naman, which actually worked for PRRD very, very well, or President Duterte in 16. The whole change, the promise of change. So I think he's leveraging on that. It's very cleverly worded and very, very cleverly strategized in terms of attack strategy, hitting two birds with one stone, and yet being almost benign about it. He's not directly hitting anybody on a personal level. Calling them unsavory terms. He's just saying, bakit nag-aaway na lang parate? Is this what Philippine politics has devolved into? A fight between two families. Let's get another guy on the job.
You know, what can other candidates, and frankly, even VP Lenny, take from Duterte's playbook? I mean, let's face it, the guy started, he was at 1-2%. Am I correct?
Yes, indeed.
1-2%. And this was a time when, of course, leaders were very NCR-centric, so to speak. So here's one coming from Davao, we knew of his name, 1-2%, and suddenly ended up with those numbers. And that's one person that didn't have machinery and had no money to begin with. But something clicked. So what can they take from Duterte's playbook?
Well, I'm not sure if it's something they would necessarily take, given the personalities of our current crop of candidates. But really, what President Duterte did in 16 was he created, the technical term here is, he created a really unstoppable cult of belonging.
You're right.
It was, if you're not with us, you are against us, and we will ravage your town. If you are not, if you are anti-Duterte, it was us versus them. He created that very strong cult of belonging, wherein his followers were almost warriors. And in fact, I'm using that term because they themselves use it. They are Duterte warriors.
And the class war. Don't forget the class war too.
They did leverage greatly on that, wherein it's the oligarch, di ba? The term, it was the word du jour during 16, di ba? Mapag-aping oligarch, mapang-abusong oligarch, and the intellectual elite. Diyan lumabas yung, edi ikaw na magaling, pag hindi ka Duterte, edi ikaw na magaling, edi ikaw na mag-presidente. So I'm not sure if it's a strategy that will necessarily work at this point, especially given the personality and inclinations of our current crop of candidates.
So would you say the elections are over, Alan, based on your personal experience?
Well, absolutely not. I'm a math guy at heart. We were talking about President Duterte's own example. In 2016, if you look at his candlestick chart, or it doesn't have to be a candlestick chart, just if you just track the survey results, he only pulled away on the March 15 to 20 survey of the SWS. Is the door closing fast? Yes, it is, but it hasn't closed entirely yet. Depending on which survey you're looking at, some will say the leader is at 60, some will say he's at 50, SWS, for example. But the fact is, there is a drop. There is velocity. We're talking about velocity. Some are going up, and the trajectory is going down. So the short answer to your question is no. I don't think the elections are over. We'll find out in May.
Okay, so let's talk about trajectory. As we know, trajectory is everything.
Absolutely.
It actually states how you're going to finish the race. So right now, among the candidates, would you say, let me read. Okay, so first, the Pulse Asia survey had 2,400 respondents. So that's where Mr. Marcos is at 60%.
60, yeah.
And Robredo was it 16?
16, yes.
16. Now, the SWS survey has 1,200 respondents. And Domagoso, well, Isko and Manny have an 11% share each,
Tied.
right?
Yeah.
Tied. Okay. And of course, you have Senator Lacson at 6. He's quite steady, would you say?
Yes, and very consistent with who Senator Lacson is. He is a steady guy.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. So in terms of trajectory, how many points? I mean, clearly, does Robredo, or let's put it to Isko, per month, based on you being a math guy, you'd have to win to make it to May 9?
Well, if the trajectory is Marcos Jr., and this is purely linear before I get blasted by every math and statistics professor out there, this is purely linear extrapolation. If we're looking at the leader, Marcos Jr., dropping at 7% every survey, yeah, assuming he will, of course, that's a wild assumption. But if he is dropping at 7%, it will take about 7 weeks for VP Lenny to catch up and eventually take the lead. But that's, again, a purely linear assumption. And before I get blasted in the comment section, I am saying that the realism of that happening is up in the air. Whether that's a realistic scenario or not, it's up in the air.
Okay, so Mr. Marcos's numbers, I mean, clearly, before Mayor Sara Duterte came, he was hitting maybe a high 20s and high 30s or mid 30s, correct?
Yes.
So really the Duterte voter base that solidified Mr. Marcos. Would that be fair? Yes.
Absolutely. And again, the geography of it, looking at it geographically, it was, and I know this has been romanticized very much so, but it's, again, the solid north consolidating with Mindanao, di ba? So, magaling. So, Visayas ngayon ang battleground. You can almost think about it in those terms.
Oh, so the Cebu vote.
Well, the Cebu vote.
The Cebu endorsement for
Cebu
President
endorsement.
would matter. There are
And,
3 million Cebuano voters.
And let's not forget, early on in the campaign, even during the pre-campaign, let's not forget that Vice Presidential candidate Mayor Inday Sara got or enlisted the daughter of Gov. Gwen Garcia as her spokesperson. So perhaps there was a lot of long-term planning and strategic planning even then.
Okay, so my next question, should one withdraw? And who should it be? To see the other candidates or the opposition actually, I won't use opposition because they're not all opposition, but alternatives to even have a fighting chance. If I were to ask you now.
Oh my goodness. Wow. I'm checking the title of the program. Head Start pala to. Hindi pala hotspot pala. Imbes na Head Start.
Who should withdraw?
Well,
I mean, this isn't personal against any candidate, wherein you'd see a significant gain.
Very agnostically, I think there is a safe answer to that question. Agnostically, if you ask who should withdraw for their, I mean, let's again put the assumption in. The assumption is to take down the survey leader. Then agnostically, having said that, I think the answer should be everybody below the second placer should withdraw and throw their support behind the second placer.
Okay, but my question is, would, let's say, Isko Moreno's supporters vote for VP Lenny, or would they go to Mr. Marcos? Because you have Moreno that's centrist.
In fact, I would say that that's a split. I would think that that's a 50-50 split. One of the developments we were closely watching as campaign strategists is how the initial
Mm-mm.
brickbats of
Mm-mm.
President Duterte would play out, because he initially started hitting Mayor Isko, and then it stopped.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
it stopped, and people sort of forgot about it. So there is a big chance that a lot of Mayor Isko's voters, should he bow out, I'm not saying he will, absolutely not,
Mm-mm.
but should he bow out, I would say it's 50-50. They would go to Marcos Jr.
Mm-mm. And where would Manny Pacquiao's voters go? Because you know the reason I'm asking, there was a blind item on one of the candidates already, right? I'm sure you've seen this.
Yes,
And one of the candidates might withdraw in March.
right, right. Well, if it is Manny Pacquiao, I would think his votes would primarily go to Vice President Lenny.
Okay. And if Ping Lacson withdraws, I mean, I doubt that would happen, but I'm just curious.
I would think that it would be Mayor Isko who would benefit most from a withdrawal from Senator Ping, in terms of analogous and very, very similar messaging. The get it done guy, the action guy. So very, very similar. You could almost make the case that Mayor Isko, although he's coming from the executive, is almost a young Senator Ping, if you think about it in those terms.
Okay. My last question, Alan. I mean, your father is a veteran when it comes to political campaigning and political strategy. And I'm sure he's lived through the Marcos era and probably has even participated in 86. But what vision are you seeing for the country after a possible Marcos victory?
Well, I am hoping that it will be a story of redemption. I'm praying that it is a story of redemption. If indeed he does win, if the surveys continue and he does take the presidency, first of all, the voice of the people is the voice of God. We can hem and haw and cry about it all we want, but the fact is the majority voted him in, and that's the way democracy works. So the prayer is that he will take this experience and really use it as a redemption story and say, everything you have been saying about my family, all of your fears, all of your apprehensions about the return to martial law, about my supposed desire to steal from the national coffers, all untrue. In fact, I will be the complete opposite of that. I'm hoping that this is the outcome. That's the prayer.